At 7:37 on Monday morning, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake fractured the seabed 20 kilometers offshore Mindanao. In General Santos, a city of 720 buildings collapsed into streets. An entire mountainside fell. By Tuesday, 40-plus dead, 450-plus injured, 2 sent homes destroyed. But here is the detail that tells the real story. This earthquake came from the Cotabato Trench, the exact same fault that ruptured in 1976 and killed thousands with a 9-meter tsunami. This time, the tsunami was only 1 meter. The difference between 1 meter and 9 meters had nothing to do with warning systems, preparation, or luck. It came down to one variable: how deep the rock broke, which means the one thing that protected the coast on Monday is the exact thing nobody can count on the next time. And the next rupture could be catastrophic. The sequence of events happened in compressed time. At 7:37 in the morning local time on Monday, June 8th, the continental plate lurched downward. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center registered the magnitude at 7.8. In the seconds that followed, seismic waves reached General Santos, the region's largest city. Within minutes, the Philippine Seismology Agency broadcast evacuation alerts. Everyone on the southern coast received immediate orders to move upslope. By mid-morning, damage assessments began. Rescue crews were already digging. The commercial building on the main street was down. A church was destroyed. The Jollibee next to it was rubble. By afternoon, the tsunami threat had formally passed. The sirens stopped. Warnings were lifted. But the ground refused to settle. For the next 2 hours, aftershocks kept coming. The largest measured magnitude 6.5, powerful enough that rescue crews had to abandon the rubble piles and retreat, waiting for the earth to stop moving before they could climb back in and continue searching. The shaking felt intensely across 420 kilometers. In Manado, on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, people reported strong tremors. A magnitude 7.8 does not remain local. The energy released on that fault was transmitted across the entire region. To understand why this matters beyond the immediate headlines, you have to see the geography. The Philippines sits directly on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a curved arc of fault lines and volcanic systems that circle the entire ocean basin. It is one of the most geologically active regions on Earth. But the specific structure that broke on Monday is called the Cotabato Trench. This trench runs along the southwestern edge of Mindanao, just offshore. It is not a valley or a depression in the usual sense. It is a subduction zone, a place where one plate of the Earth's crust is being forced underneath another in a slow, relentless process. The Cotabato Trench sits almost directly against the coastline. There are no hundreds of miles of open ocean for waves to cross. When this fault ruptures, any tsunami it generates does not take hours to arrive like the waves that travel across the Pacific. It arrives in 2 to 5 minutes. That timeline means there is no realistic warning window. By the time an alert reaches a phone, the water is already at the door. This is the geographic curse of this particular region: extreme proximity to extreme danger. General Santos has grown into a major urban center precisely because it sits on this coast, unaware that the location making it valuable is also at the location that offers almost no margin for survival. The mechanism of subduction is where the true physics emerges. The plates do not slide past each other smoothly. Instead, they lock together along the boundary. The upper plate bends, the descending plate locks. Over decades, sometimes centuries, strain accumulates. The plates bend more and more, storing energy like a spring being slowly compressed. When the stress becomes too great, the lock fails catastrophically. The bent upper plate snaps back toward horizontal. As it does, it shoves everything sitting above it, including the entire column of seawater resting on the seafloor. That sudden vertical displacement of water is what creates a tsunami. The bigger the upward movement of the seabed, the larger the wave. On Monday, the earthquake ruptured at a depth of more than 30 kilometers down inside the descending slab. This matters enormously. A deeper rupture lifts the seafloor less than a shallow rupture would. Less seafloor displacement means less water displaced. Less water displaced means a smaller wave. In 1976, the fault ruptured at a shallow depth, just 20 kilometers down. It happened minutes after midnight while the entire coast slept. The seabed heaved upward dramatically. A wall of water rose to 9 meters high and swept more than 700 kilometers of shoreline. That tsunami, not the shaking, caused roughly 85% of all deaths. On Monday, the earthquake was nearly as powerful, but it broke deeper. One variable, depths, was most of the reason the coast saw 1 meter of water instead of 9. The thing that decided whether dozens died or thousands died was not anything anyone built, planned, or controlled. It was a crack in the ocean floor at a specific depth underground. The wave didn't stay offshore. 83 centimeters reached Sulawesi, 30 centimeters hit Palau, 20 centimeters washed onto southern Japan. One earthquake, 3 other nations felt it. But numbers don't kill people, buildings do. In General Santos, a 4-story commercial building collapsed in seconds. Rescuers pulled 2 out alive. One came out dead. By Tuesday, the scanners found nothing. Outside the rubble, Linda Duvio waited for word about her son. "All I want," she said, "is to bring him out so we can be at peace." Jojo Kalma, 44, was driving past a building when it fell in front of him, shaking so violent he couldn't stop himself from crying. All he could think about were his kids. 8 kilometers away, 100 students and 12 teachers stood in formation for their first day back from summer break. When the ground moved, most of them stayed still. That stillness is the reason none of them were hurt. At the damaged hospital, doctors set up tents in a parking lot and kept working. In one of those tents, a young mother gave birth. This wasn't a freak event, it was a pattern. 8 months earlier, a 6.9 off Cebu killed 79 people, the deadliest Philippine tremor in over a decade. The country also absorbs 20 typhoons a year. By any measure, it is one of the most disaster-exposed nations on Earth, and the Cotabato Trench isn't finished. It has ruptured before. It will rupture again. General Santos in 2026 is not General Santos in 1976. It's bigger, denser, more concrete, more people standing between a crowded coastline and a fault with 0 warning time. The city is now under a state of calamity. Engineers are still counting the damage. The structures that survived this earthquake are the same ones that must survive the next. 5 All Seas confirmed it. Strongest quake to hit the Philippines this year. Wire agencies called it the most powerful since 1976. The fault that caused the worst destruction in living memory just reminded everyone it's still fully loaded. The tsunami warnings have been lifted. The airport remains closed. Over 6,000 school buildings sit empty and unchecked while engineers inspect them one structure at a time. Families who lost everything are sleeping in vacant lots and parking lot tents. But the ground is still moving. Aftershocks have not stopped. Each one sends the crews in General Santos stepping back from the rubble, waiting for it to settle, then climbing back in. Somewhere off the coast of Sarangani, more than 30 kilometers down, the slab that broke on Monday is resettling into its new position. The stress that accumulated over decades has been partially released, but not fully. The mechanism continues. How long will the aftershock sequence persist? Weeks, months? The pattern from 1976 provides limited guidance because every rupture behaves differently, and the depth variable changes everything about what comes next. Why is the interval between major ruptures along this trench getting shorter? Historical records suggest the pattern of failure is accelerating, but seismic systems do not always follow linear trends. What happens if the next rupture occurs at a shallower depth than the one recorded on Monday? The mathematics are clear. A rupture at 20 kilometers instead of 30 would generate a wave far more destructive than what the coast just experienced. The event is not over. The tsunami warnings have been lifted, but the system itself remains in motion. Rescue operations continue. Engineers are still inspecting structures. Families are still missing from the rubble. More importantly, the fault that released energy on Monday has not finished its work. The Cotabato Trench sits exactly where it has always been. The stress that accumulated before Monday is now partially relieved, but new stress is already beginning to accumulate again along the same boundary. The plate system operates on timescales measured in decades and centuries. From its perspective, the earthquake and everything that followed is simply part of an ongoing cycle. The coast of Mindanao has returned to an apparent calm, but beneath the surface, in the rock and the plates and the locked boundaries 30 kilometers down, the forces continue their slow, inexorable work. The next rupture is not a question of if, it is a question of when. And when it comes, the depth of that break will determine whether the story ends with dozens of deaths or thousands. The ground has stopped shaking for now, but the system is still moving.